Night is coming. One by one the stars appear. Night is coming. And soon it will be time for stories. Long ago, storytellers invented magical stories about the sun, moon, stars, and the other great mysteries of the sky. The stories were not meant to explain these mysteries. Rather, they were told to help people pay attention to our world. Today, scientists use another way to help us pay attention to the mysteries of the sky. By observing, measuring, and predicting, they explain how the world works. And like the storytellers of old, today's scientists can lead us to better know and care for our world. Storytellers and scientists are today's SkyTellers, for they both tell us about the sky. And though each tells a different kind of story, both help us to better know our world and ourselves. Night is here. Listen now. This is the time for stories.
Long ago, before this earth came to be, there was another world high above the sky dome. There were beings in the shape of humans who lived there. In the center of that sky world grew a great tree from whose branches hung all sorts of fruit. On top of that tree was a huge white flower that shone as brightly as the sun. So it was that life and light came from the sky tree. Among those beings was a man who cared for this tree of life. His wife was expecting, and she began to have dreams. In her dreams, she saw that there was something beyond and below their world. "The tree of life must be uprooted," she said to her husband. "I do not know how, but something good will come of this." And though it troubled him to do so, he saw that her dream was strong. He did as she asked and uprooted the sky tree. There, where the tree had been rooted, was a great hole in the skyland. The woman looked down into that hole, but all that could be seen was a deep darkness. She got down on her knees and leaned forward, for it seemed that there was something else far, far below. Then she slipped. She reached back to try to save herself from falling, but she only succeeded in grabbing a handful of seeds from the uprooted tree, a strawberry plant in her right hand and a tobacco plant in her left. Down she fell, into that deep, deep dark, and all around her was a sound like the soft shooshing of a rattle. For a long time she fell, until she began to see brightness far below her. It was the blue gleam of water. In that water, there were birds and other beings that looked up and saw her falling. "Someone is coming," they said. "We must help her." Then the wide-winged birds, the geese and swans, flew up and caught her between their interlaced wings. But as they brought her down, they wondered where they would place her, for they knew, somehow, that she could not live in the water. Great Turtle swam to the surface and looked up. "Can you hold this one who fell?" the birds called down to Great Turtle. "I will do so," Great Turtle replied. And so Sky Woman was placed on the turtle's back. Then the water beings gathered around her. "Where are you from?" they asked. "How can we make you comfortable?" Sky Woman looked around her. "I have come from another place, far above here where there is land," she said. "Here there is only water. I am lonely for earth." "It is said that underneath this water there is land," the water being said. "We will bring some up for you." Then they began to try to dive down to the bottom. The duck and the beaver tried, and then the loon. But they could not swim deep enough to reach the earth beneath the waters. Many tried and failed. Finally, Muskrat dove. Down she went, down, down, down. Her lungs were ready to burst, but she did not stop. She reached the bottom and gathered some earth in her paws and then floated back up. It was so far down that when Muskrat reached the surface, she died, but she still held that earth in her paws. As soon as it was placed on the turtle's back, that small pawful of earth started to spread. Sky Woman began to move in a circle, dancing with small steps, her feet massaging the new earth to encourage it to grow even more. Where she made footprints in the moist earth, she dropped the seeds from the sky tree, and bushes and trees and flowers began to grow up. She planted the tobacco and the strawberries, and they grew well on the new land that stretched further than the eye could see in every direction. So it was that this earth on Turtle's back came to be long, long ago. Dane-ho.
In the olden days, people noticed that the stars remained fixed in their positions year after year after year. But there were 5 stars that were constantly traveling past the unmoving stars. These same stars appeared, then disappeared, then reappeared in the sky. People called these 5 stars the wandering stars, because they seemed to wander along their own paths. In those days, people could not have known that those wandering stars were not stars at all. They were planets. And in those days, they could not have known that there were other planets, planets that they couldn't see. And especially, they could not have known that our home, the Earth, was also a planet. Listen now. It is time for another kind of a story, a science story of how our Earth and the other planets came to be. Long ago, there lived in space giant clouds of gas and dust, all of the things necessary to make our sun and our Earth and the other planets we see today. To understand how the planets came to be, we must think back in time to before there was a sun or Earth or planets, to a time 4.5 billion years ago, when a great cloud of gas and dust, one of many such clouds, drifted in the darkness of space. As time passed, the material of the cloud began to draw together. More and more of the material collected in the center of the cloud, pulled inward by the powerful force of gravity. Eventually, the whole cloud began to draw inward and collapsed into a great spinning disk. Most of the material of the cloud collapsed into the center, making a great ball of gas so massive that deep within its center, it grew so hot that nuclear reactions began. These reactions produced energy, and our sun was born, and the deep darkness was replaced with brightness, the brightness of our shining sun. But not all of the material of the cloud became the sun. A disk of leftover material now spun about the new sun. The particles of matter in this disk occasionally collided. Sometimes the particles stuck together, and sometimes they bounced off each other. When they stuck together, they made a bigger particle. Scientists call this growing together of separate parts accretion. And it was this accretion, or growing together, that gradually caused the leftover material to form into lumps that would fit into a muskrat's paw. And the lumps eventually grew large enough to attract other lumps and clumps through their own gravity. Gravity shaped this spinning material into spheres. And the spheres grew like the earth on Turtle's back, drawing in more and more rocks and dust until they grew to the size of planets, sweeping up most of the matter around them. These became the rocky planets that circled close around the sun where it was warmer. Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars. Farther from the sun, where it was colder, these small rock spheres became indeed like turtles' back and drew in cold gas and ice. They became surrounded by great amounts of this material, and these became the giant planets, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune, with small rocky centers surrounded by thick layers formed from gas and ice. And even farther out, where the sun's energy was weak but its gravity still kept material circling about it, the dust particles clumped with frozen gas and ice, and small objects were formed. The largest of these, so far as we know, was the icy place we call Pluto, circling where the sun is distant and dim and the deep darkness of space comes back. But close in, closer than icy Pluto, closer than the gassy giants Jupiter and Saturn, closer even than red Mars, lies the rocky planet called Earth. And when it was formed, and when gas from its hot interior escaped into the sky to become an atmosphere, and when water rained down from that sky and filled its hollows and became the great oceans of water, then Earth became a place for the creatures of the water and the land. It became a place where there were wide-winged birds, the geese and the swans. It became a place for the duck and the beaver, the loon and the muskrat. It became a place for seeds to sprout in the earth, for bushes and trees and flowers. And at last it became a place for us, warmed by the sun, fed by the plants and animals, our thirst quenched by the great waters of the earth. Now we look up into the sky and dream of being the first humans who will live up there, live in the world high above the sky dome, live in space. Will we find new homes up there? Will you be one of the human beings who will live up there someday? It is a night to dream of such things. Dream before the sun returns to bring us day on our good home, the earth.